My name is Emmett Crowder. I'm 38 years old, and on the second Sunday in September, at my mother's kitchen table, in front of 14 people, my mother laughed at me, really laughed. The kind where she had to put her hand on my aunt's arm to steady herself because my sister had just announced to the room that I was 38 and still renting. Here's how it actually went. It was my mother's 66th birthday, September 14th. Pot roast, because it's always pot roast, and the house smelled like that and lemon furniture polish, because she dusted for company. 14 of us jammed around a table built for 8, with the card table on the end for the kids. My cousin Dano asked me how the business was doing. I said we'd had a decent year. I said we'd finally gotten the millwork side up and running. And my sister Bryn said, without looking up from her plate, "Careful, Dano, he'll tell you about the trucks." A couple of people laughed, polite. Then she said, 7 trucks, 38 years old and still renting, but 7 trucks. And my mother laughed. Not a courtesy laugh, not the little exhale you do when you don't want your daughter to feel bad. A real one. Head back, hand on my Aunt Verna's forearm. And when she got her breath, she said, "Oh, leave him alone, he's fine, he's got his little apartment." His little apartment. Nobody defended me. Not one person at that table. My nephew Sawyer, who's 16, looked at his plate. That's the closest thing I got to a defense. I didn't say anything for about 11 seconds. I finished the water in my glass. I set it down. Then I reached into my pocket and took out my keys and put them on the table next to my plate truck key, shop key, 2 brass house keys, and an old worn key on a leather fob that hasn't opened a door since 1997. And I said 10 words. 10. I'd been carrying them around for about 19 months, waiting to be sure I meant them and not just wanting them. I'm not going to tell you what they were yet. I'm not being cute. It's that those 10 words don't mean anything to you until you know what was in the folder in the toolbox in the back seat of my truck, parked at the curb outside that house. And you need to know what my sister's front door had to do with me. And you need to know what a woman named Adele Rance said to me at 4:52 on a Thursday afternoon, 5 months later, which is the exact moment my sister's entire life stopped being her own idea. I promise you all 3, stay with me. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where nobody yells, nobody throws a punch, and everybody eventually gets an itemized bill. If you have ever been the one quietly holding a family up, paying, fixing, showing up, and then getting laughed at for what you don't appear to have, this story is for you. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Then subscribe, because the last 10 minutes of this are the reason I'm telling it. But let me back up. I own a company called Crowder Restoration and Millwork. Water and fire restoration, structural drying, and the part I actually love, historic millwork. Windows, casings, stair parts, the stuff nobody makes anymore. I started it in March of 2013 with $9,400, a 2004 cargo van with a bad alternator, and a wet vac I bought used off a church. Last year, we did $4.6 million in revenue with 19 employees. We carry $2 million in general liability. We've never had a lien filed against us, and I have never once missed a payroll. Not in 12 years. Not in 2020, when we sat dead for 6 weeks. I tell you that not to brag. I tell you it because of what my job actually is. People think restoration is fans and dehumidifiers. It isn't. It's paper. It's moisture logs twice a day, before and after photos with timestamps, signed authorization forms, change orders initialed at the job site, lien waivers, certificates of insurance, permit cards in the window. Every single thing we do gets written down, dated, and filed, because when an insurance carrier decides 8 months later that they don't want to pay for a $200,000 rebuild, the only thing standing between me and losing my house is, sorry, my apartment is the file. I have a storage room at the shop on Anvil Road with 14 filing cabinets in it. Everybody on my crew jokes about it. There's a label maker on the shelf and everything. That room is the reason this story ends the way it does. Now, about the renting. I live in Unit 5C at the Foundry Lofts on Dresden Street. 620 square feet. Exposed brick. One window that faces a parking deck, and a radiator that sounds like somebody's hitting it with a pipe wrench. $1,285 a month. I drive a 2014 F250 with 214,000 miles on it, and my family took those two facts and built an entire mythology out of them. Emmett never settled down. Emmett's still figuring it out. Emmett's got that little business. What none of them ever asked was where the money went. By September of 2025, I own the shop building at 4400 Anvil Road, bought, in 2018, for $340,000. I owned a duplex on Corbin Street. I owned a strip of 3 storefronts on Bellwether that I'd been slowly rehabbing since 2021. And I owned a 3-bedroom ranch at 7 Quarry Bend, which I had bought at a county auction on November 28, 2017, for $184,000. That's the house my sister was sitting in when she wasn't at my mother's table. That's the house she lived in. Hold that thought. We're going to walk up to it slow. My grandfather was Amos Crowder. He ran Crowder Lock and Key at 218 Bellwether Street from 1961 until 1997. One room, deep and narrow, with a pressed tin ceiling and a display case full of padlocks that nobody bought. The shop smelled like hot brass and 3-in-1 oil. If you've never smelled a key being cut, the wheel bites the blank. And there's this thin, bright smell, almost sweet, like a penny under your tongue. I don't know how to explain what that does to a 9-year-old. I was there every Saturday from the time I was 9 until I was 15. He paid me in quarters and an orange soda from the machine at the barber's next door. He taught me 3 things. He taught me to cut a key by hand. He taught me to write down every job in a green columnar ledger: date, customer, door, charge, paid or not. And he told me the pencil was part of the tool, not separate from it. And he told me the thing I've thought about maybe once a week for 25 years. We were closing up one night, and some guy had come in earlier that day, rattling a big janitor ring of keys, loud, telling my grandfather he was a property man. And then he'd tried to talk his way out of a $40 bill. After he left, Grandpa cleaned the wheel with a brush and said, "Emmett, anybody can rattle keys." I said, "Okay." He said, "Keys are noise, deeds are quiet." That's it. That's the whole sermon. He said it once and never repeated it, which is why it stuck. He sold the shop in '97 to a guy who turned it into a nail salon, but he kept one key. The back door key, brass, big, on a leather fob gone soft and dark as a saddle, stamped Crowder Lock and Key, Cheney Falls. He died in December of 2011, 88 years old, in his chair, with the TV on. He left my sister the upright piano and $4,000. He left me $4,000 and that key. Bryn sold the piano in 2013 for $1,100. The key has been on my ring every day since I was 24. It opens nothing. It's been on there so long the brass has worn a shallow scoop where it rides against my truck fob. Remember it. It's the last thing in this story. Here's the childhood part, and I'll keep it short, because I don't think a bad bedroom situation is a tragedy. It's just where the shape of a thing gets set. Our house growing up was 118 Sable Court. 3 bedrooms. My parents in one, my sister in one, and me in the third until 2001, when my grandmother on my mom's side moved in for what turned out to be the last 2 years of her life. Somebody had to give up a room. It wasn't going to be Bryn because Bryn was 17 and, in my mother's words, a girl needs privacy. So I got the utility room. My dad framed a wall, put in a door, and I slept on a pull-out next to the water heater from age 14 to age 17. It smelled permanently like dryer sheets. The water heater ticked when it fired this dull metal tick, 4 or 5 in a row. And to this day, I sleep better with a fan on because I need a sound in the room. I mentioned it exactly once at Christmas in 2002, half joking. And my mother said, "Oh, Emmett, nobody's keeping score." Write that sentence down. You're going to hear it a lot. It gets shorter and harder every time it comes back, until eventually somebody hands it back to her. Here's the part that actually shaped me, though. Because I was in the utility room, I was the one by the back door. So I got the house key. Bryn never had one. She'd lose it. So I was the one who let people in. I was the one who locked up. I was the one who took the trash to the curb Tuesday nights and brought the cans back Wednesday, and shoveled the walk, and got the mail when we were on vacation. I was 15 years old and I was the building superintendent of my own family. And I liked it. That's the honest part. I liked being the one who could do things. Being useful was the only currency I had in that house. And I spent it hard, and it worked. And I never learned another way to be loved. I trained them to treat me like this. Every single one of them. I want that on the record before I tell you what they did, because otherwise, this sounds like it happened to me. My dad, Rusty Crowder, installed HVAC for 31 years and died of a heart attack in the parking lot of a supply house on August 22, 2016. He was 63. I was 29. He left a $22,000 life insurance policy and a mortgage. That's where this starts. Not with malice, with arithmetic. Stage 1, September 2016. I sat at the kitchen table at Sable Court with my mother 2 weeks after the funeral, and we went through it. The 2007 refinance, the one they did to pay for Bryn's wedding, $28,000 cash out, had reset the clock. Balance still owing, $146,000. Payment with taxes and insurance, $1,140 a month. Her pension was $1,410. Her survivor benefit hadn't started yet. She looked at me across the table, and she didn't ask. That's important. She never once asked. She just looked at me, and her chin did a thing, and I said, "I've got $640 a month." I set up an automatic transfer out of the business account on the 3rd of every month. In the memo field, I typed, Sable. That was September 2016. That transfer ran, without a single interruption, for 109 months. Stage 2. November 2017. Bryn and Deke were renting a place on Holloway Street, and the owner sold it out from under them. 60 days to go. 2 kids, one of them a baby. There was a house at a county tax auction on Quarry Bend. 3-bed ranch, 1974. Dead furnace, mold in the crawl space. A tree through the back corner of the roof. Nobody wanted it, because nobody wanted the crawl space. Crawl spaces are literally my job. I bought it November 28, 2017, for $184,000. Deed recorded in Wexler County, Book 4412, page 209. Then my crew and I put 9 weekends into it. New furnace, remediation, new roof deck on the back third, refinished the oak floors, and I built the kitchen cabinets myself in the shop out of quarter-sawn white oak, because I wanted my niece to grow up in a house with real cabinets. Materials and subs, $61,000. I never billed $1 of labor. Stage 3, February 3rd, 2018. Bryn and Deke moved in. We had a deal, $1,100 a month, $300 of which credited toward a purchase price of $250,000, with 5 years to get financing. $250 was well under what it was worth by then, and we all knew it. That was the point. I wrote the agreement myself. 1 page. I printed it at the shop. We signed it at her kitchen table with a Sharpie because that's what was in the drawer, and Deke made a joke about needing a lawyer, and I said, "It's family." That 1 page is the single dumbest thing I have ever done in my professional life. I want to be honest with you about that, because it matters later, and because I know some of you do the same thing. I am a man who initials change orders on a $100,000 job over a $50 outlet relocation, and I handed my sister a house on one page of copier paper with a Sharpie signature. That's on me. Nobody made me do that. Stage 4, 2018 through 2019. They paid. On time, every month, 25 months straight. And in March of 2018, Bryn posted a photo of the four of them on the front steps with a caption that said, and I remember the wording, "Closed on our forever home dreams do come true." 206 likes. I liked it too. I want you to know that. I sat in my truck outside a burned-out duplex and tapped the little heart, because I was happy for her, and because correcting it would have felt petty, and because I'd already decided that being the guy who quietly did things was better than being the guy who needed credit. That decision cost me about 7 years, Stage 5, 2019 and 2020, Sable Court. June 2019. My mother's roof. 22-year-old 3-tab, curling. I put my crew on it for a Saturday. Materials, 6,200, no labor. At the cookout that fall, my mother told my aunt, "We finally got that roof done." February 2020. Her furnace died. 8,700, unit and install. My dad's old trade, which I do not do, so I actually paid a competitor. March through September 2020. I told Bryn and Deke to stop paying rent. Deke's whole industry stopped moving, and I had a business line of credit, and they didn't. 7 months, $7,700. Forgiven. Not deferred. Forgiven, in writing, in a text message, which small mercy I still have. Stage 6, January 2021. My mother retired for real. I moved the Sable transfer from 640 to the full 1140. That same month, I did the one smart thing I did in the whole first half of this story. My accountant told me to get the rentals out of my personal name, so I formed Crowder Restoration Holdings LLC and quit-claimed Quarry Bend into it. Recorded January 19th, 2021. And while I was at the attorney's office anyway, I had her draft a real lease option for Bryn. 9 pages. It honored everything from the Sharpie agreement. Same price, same credits, same window, it just said it in language that would survive a bank. I brought it to her on a Sunday in February 2021. She didn't sign it. She texted me 4 days later. I have the screenshot. It says, "I'm not signing something that turns me into a tenant in my own house. This is so weird of you, Emmett." I let it go. Stage 7, 2021, then March 2022. They paid 6 months out of 12 in 2021, 6,600 short. The last rent payment I ever received from my sister was February 4th, 2022, $1,100. After that, nothing. Not a partial, not a note, nothing. For 43 months, I texted. Not angry, I'd send something in April like, "Hey, want to sit down and figure out a plan?" And she'd send back, "Yes," after Sawyer's tournament. And then June, "Ugh, the bank is being weird about self-employed income." And then September, "Emmett, I can't do this right now." And in December 2022, at Christmas, when I finally said it out loud to my mother in the kitchen while she was rinsing a pan, I said, "Bryn hasn't paid me since February." My mother turned off the water, dried her hands, and said, "Emmett, nobody's keeping score." Second time, sharper, Stage 8, 2023 and 2024. Property taxes on Quarry Bend, $4,180 a year. I paid them. Insurance, $1,320 a year. I paid it. Water heater in 2023, $1,100. Paid it. When their dishwasher went out, Deke texted me a photo of it, and I sent a guy. In August 2023, they put in a hot tub. $9,200, financed. Bryn posted it. In March 2024, she called me and asked me to just put the house in my name. so she could take the mortgage interest deduction. I said there was no mortgage, so there was no interest. And she said I was being difficult. And then she said, "You're so controlling about money. It's actually a little sad." In November 2024, she asked to borrow $12,000 for Sawyer's travel hockey and Poppy's orthodontics. I sent it that afternoon. Never mentioned again. I know some of you are yelling at your screen right now. Just evict them. It's your house. File the paperwork. We could've. My attorney told me later that in this state, with that fact pattern, I could have had them out in about 10 weeks. Here's why I didn't. And I'm going to be straight with you because I've had a lot of time to think about it. Part of it was the kids. A 16-year-old and an 11-year-old in a school district. And I'd built the kitchen in that house with my own hands specifically so my niece would grow up in it. Part of it was my mother, and knowing exactly what it would cost me at every holiday for the rest of my life. But the real reason, the true one, is that I had spent 30-some years being the person who fixes things without asking for anything, and I did not know how to be a different person. Sending my sister an eviction notice wasn't just a legal act. It was going to make me somebody my family had never met. And I wasn't ready. Being needed is a hell of a drug. That's the whole confession. That's the flaw. So instead, I did the only thing I actually knew how to do. I opened a file. Sometime in early 2024, I started keeping it in a hard folder in the crossbox in the bed of my truck. Because I didn't want it at the shop where somebody might file it. And I didn't want it at my apartment where I'd have to look at it. It was 3/4 of an inch thick by that September. What was in it? The recorded warranty deed. The quitclaim into the LLC, 8 years of paid property tax receipts, 8 years of insurance declarations pages, which lists the named insured as Crowder Restoration Holdings, LLC, and the occupants as tenants, the 1-page Sharpie agreement, the 9-page lease option she wouldn't sign, along with the screenshot of her refusing it, a bank-generated payment history showing every deposit from February 2018 to February 2022, and then a column of nothing. Receipts for the hot water heater, the dishwasher, the crawl space, the furnace, and a single sheet of green ledger paper, my grandfather's kind. I buy the same pad where I'd written it out in pencil, by hand, in his format. Date, item, amount, paid or not. Unpaid rent, March 2022 through September 2025. 43 months at $1,100. $47,300, and a second green sheet headed Sable Court. $640 a month, September 2016 through December 2020. 52 months, $33,280. $1,140 a month, January 2021 through September 2025. 57 months, $64,980. Roof, furnace, water heater, gutters, the maple that came down in the 2022 storm. Total, 109 consecutive months, $118,940. My mother knew that number. Not the exact figure, but she knew what she wasn't paying. She'd known for 9 years, and she'd let the family believe she managed it herself. At my aunt's 70th, she said out loud, "I've been very careful since Rusty died." At church, she told a woman named Pat that she was blessed to be in good shape. I never corrected her. Not once. I thought I was protecting her pride. What I was actually doing was funding a story in which I was the son who never got his act together. I paid for that story. Monthly. On the 3rd. Which brings us back to the pot roast. September 14th, 2025. Her 66th. 14 people. I'd brought the ice and the folding chairs from the shop, and I'd gotten there at 10 in the morning to fix the sticking storm door, because my mother had mentioned it on the phone the way she mentions things. Bryn got there at 1:15 with a cake from the Good Bakery, and a bottle of Prosecco and a story about a listing that had gone 11,000 over asking. Because that's her job. My sister is a licensed residential real estate agent at Pemberton Grove Realty. She has been since 2016. Her sign says, Bryn Ahlgren, get you home. And it's got her face on it, and there's one of those signs in yards all over Cheney Falls. Dinner went fine for about 40 minutes. Then Dano asked about the business, and I said we'd had a decent year, and Bryn said the thing about the trucks. And then she said, 38 years old and still renting, but 7 trucks. And my mother laughed and said, he's got his little apartment. I want to describe the 11 seconds after that because they're the whole story. The furnace kicked on. Somebody's fork hit a plate. My Aunt Verna, my dad's sister, 71, drives a Buick. Smells like Aquanet and Peppermint stopped chewing and looked at my mother in a way my mother did not notice. And I felt something go quiet in me. Not hot. Quiet. Like when the compressor on a job site shuts off and you suddenly hear the whole street. I did not raise my voice. I have never raised my voice at my family in my adult life. I finished my water. I set the glass down on the coaster because she keeps coasters out. I took out my keys and put them on the tablecloth. Truck key, shop key, 2 brass house keys, 1 to 118 Sable Court, 1 to 7 Quarry Bend, and my grandfather's key on the dark leather fob. 14 people looked at a pile of keys. And I said, you're right. I rent. I let that sit for a second. Starting October 1st, so do you. Then I picked the keys back up, put them in my pocket, told my mother the pot roast was good, and walked out the front door I had rehung in 2019. Bryn called after me, what is that supposed to mean? And I didn't answer. Because it wasn't a question, it was a hook, and I had spent 9 years getting caught on those. I sat in my truck at the curb for about 20 minutes before I turned the key. I remember watching the light in the front window and thinking very calmly that I'd just done a thing I could not undo, and that it had taken me until 38 years old to say a sentence with a date in it. That's all a boundary is, by the way. A sentence with a date in it. Here's what I did over the next 11 weeks. None of it was dramatic. All of it was on paper. October 2nd, 2025. I hired Vera Lindqvist of Lindqvist and Boyd in Aldergrove. Real estate litigation, 26 years. Retainer, $7,500. It ended up being $19,200 all in. I brought her the folder. She read it for 40 minutes without speaking. Then she took her glasses off and said, Mr. Crowder, in 26 years I have never had a client walk in here this organized and this late. I said, that's fair. October 6th, Vera sent Bryn and Deke a letter. Certified, return receipt, plus regular mail, plus email. It was 3 pages, and it was not a threat. It was 3 options. Option 1, buy the house. The original deal, honored in full. $250,000, all $18,000 of accrued purchase credits applied, 90 days to obtain financing. The house appraised at $342,000 that month. I was offering my sister $92,000 of equity and pretending she'd earned it. Option 2, stay as tenants. A real lease at $2,150 a month, which was under market, with the $47,300 in arrears repaid at $200 a month, no interest. Option 3, leave. Vacate by January 31st, 2026. $6,000 in relocation assistance paid by me, and a complete written waiver of the entire $47,300. Response due November 7th. I want you to sit with option 3 for a second, because it's the one that eventually made everything else impossible for her to survive. I offered to hand my sister $6,000 and forgive $47,000 for the privilege of getting my own house back. October 9th, she signed the green card. Deke signed the green card. November 7th, no response. November 12th. Vera sent a second letter extending to November 28th. No response. What I got instead was the family. My cousin Dano called me on November 15th and said, "Hey, is it true you're putting Bryn's kids out?" A woman from my mother's church, who I have not spoken to since I was confirmed, left a comment on my company's page. Deke's mother sent me a 2-paragraph message about what my father would have thought. And my mother called me on November 19th at 8:40 in the evening. "I'll give you the whole thing." It was 90 seconds. She said, "Emmett, this has gone far enough." I said, "Okay." She said, "You're embarrassing your sister." "Over what? Some old arrangement?" I said, "She hasn't paid me in 45 months. And my mother said, and here it is. Third time. And by now it had gone from soft to flat, like a countertop. Nobody's keeping score. I said, "Mom, I have to go." And I hung up on my mother for the first time in my life, gently. But I did it. Now the other half of the quiet part. On November 24th, 2025, I logged into my business banking and I scheduled the Sable transfer to run 3 more times: December, January, February, and then to stop. Then I did something I'd never done. I wrote her a letter. On paper. 2 pages. Printed. In an envelope. With a stamp. Because a text can be scrolled past and a letter has to be held. I told her I loved her. I told her I was not angry at her. Which was mostly true. I told her I had paid her housing costs for 109 consecutive months, and that I was going to stop on March 1st, and that she had 90 days of runway to decide what she wanted to do, and that I would help her do whatever she chose: sell, downsize, refinance, anything, but that I wouldn't fund it silently anymore. And I attached the green ledger sheet, photocopied, in pencil, date, item, amount, paid. $118,940. I mailed it December 1st. She never wrote back. She never called me about it. Not one word, then or since, about that letter. I found out later from Aunt Verna that she'd taken it to Bryn's house the same day it arrived, and that the two of them decided it was a manipulation tactic. If this is landing anywhere near your own family, do me a favor, comment the word deed and hit subscribe right now, because we're 4 minutes from Sunday, February 8th, and I need you in the room for that one. On January 12th, 2026, my sister listed 7 Quarry Bend for sale. MLS number 2601884. 3-bed, 2-bath. 1,612 square feet, beautifully updated custom solid oak kitchen cabinetry. $359,900. Listing agent: Bryn Allgren, Pemberton Grove Realty. Seller, as entered in the system, Bryn and Deke Allgren. I didn't know for 3 weeks. I don't look at the MLS. Restoration guys don't shop for houses. Houses find us. It went under contract on January 31st to a couple named Rennie and Tasha Pilcher. $352,000, conventional financing, closing set for March 6th. Here's what I have pieced together about what she thought she was doing, mostly from what came out later. She had convinced herself, and I think she'd genuinely gotten there, which is worse, that the house was morally hers. She'd lived in it 8 years. She'd painted it. Her kids' heights were on the laundry room door frame, and she had a piece of paper with my signature on it in Sharpie that said she could buy it for $250. Her plan, as she told 2 different family members, was to close. Wire me $250,000 out of escrow, keep the difference, and finally take care of Mom. Because by then Mom's situation was public, and Bryn had positioned herself as the one riding to the rescue. The plan had one problem, and it's the same problem in every version of this story ever told. The house wasn't hers, and a house is not an opinion. On Thursday, February 5th, 2026, at 4:52 in the afternoon, I was standing in my shop with a piece of oak stair rail across two sawhorses when my phone rang. Aldergrove number. Mr. Crowder? My name is Adele Rands. I'm a closer at Wexler Land Title. I have a quick question. Are you selling 7 Quarry Bend? I set the rail down. I said, "No, ma'am." There was a pause. Then she said very carefully, the way people talk when they've just figured out they're standing on something. "Sir, I'm going to need you to say that again, slowly, and then I'm going to need you to send me an email." The title search had come back that afternoon. Owner of record, Crowder Restoration Holdings LLC, Book 4412, page 209, recorded November 28, 2017. Quit claim to LLC recorded January 19, 2021. No lien. No contract for deed of record. No Algren anywhere in the chain. They'd sent the standard seller packet to the listed sellers and gotten it back signed. Signed by 2 people with no legal interest in the property. I sent the email at 5:20. Deed attached, tax receipts attached, insurance attached. 4 sentences, no adjectives. Now here's the part I need you to hear, because it's the part where I could have done something ugly and didn't. At 5:34 that evening, I called my sister. She picked up on the 4th ring, breezy, in a car. I said, "The title company called me." Silence. I said, "Bryn, you have until tomorrow at 5 o'clock to call the Pilcher's agent and tell them yourself. If you do that, I will stay out of it entirely, and I'll leave option 3 on the table, and the 6,000 still stands." She said, and this is verbatim. I wrote it down 20 minutes later in the truck. "You are unbelievable. You are actually going to blow up my deal because Mom laughed at you at a birthday party." I said, 5 o'clock tomorrow. She said, "You've always been so dramatic about money. Nobody's keeping score, Emmett." 4th time. And it was the first time I heard it for what it actually was. Not wisdom, not grace. It's what you say to the person keeping the score when the score is bad. I said, "I am. Somebody had to." And I hung up. She did not call the Pilcher's agent. She held an open house instead. She'd been planning it for 2 weeks, a combined open house and going away party, 1 to 4, at the house on Quarry Bend. Catering trays from the market on Bellwether. A photographer for an hour, for her marketing. She invited the whole family under the heading, "Come say goodbye to the house." She invited me. Group text, January 28th, before any of this. Never rescinded. I went. I want to be honest about why, because I've thought about it a lot and I don't think the reason is flattering. I told myself I went because if the thing was going to come apart in front of 30 people, my mother should hear it standing next to me and not from Bryn's version at 9 o'clock that night. That's a real reason. It's also not the only one. Some part of me wanted to be in the room. I got there at 1:40. I parked down the street. I wore a canvas jacket and jeans, and I brought a manila folder and left it under my arm the whole time like a guy holding a menu. The house smelled like a vanilla plug-in and warm meatballs. There was a sign in the yard with my sister's face on it. "Get you home." The kitchen I built was full of people leaning on it. Maybe 35 folks. Aunt Verna, Dano and his wife, Deke's parents. 2 couples I didn't know who were clearly there to look at the house. My mother in the good blue cardigan, holding a paper plate, glowing, because her daughter was selling a house for $352,000. Bryn saw me come in. Her face did something complicated for about half a second and then reset. At around 2:15 she went up 3 steps on the staircase and clinked a glass, and everyone turned, and she made a speech. She thanked everyone for 8 years of memories. She got a little emotional about Poppy's height marks on the laundry room door frame, which was genuinely sad, and I felt it too. She said they were moving up. And then she said, "And I want to say something because people have heard things." The room got very still. She said, "My brother is here. Emmett, hi." Some heads turned, and I love him, but I want everybody to know that this man, who has never owned a home in his life, spent the last 4 months trying to put my children out on the street over a piece of paper. Somebody made a small sound. She said, "So this sale isn't just for us. It's so I can finally take care of Mom, since apparently that's on me now too." My mother put her hand over her mouth, not in horror, moved. I did not say a word. I did not move off the wall by the coat closet. I did not raise my voice, and I gave them nothing, because there was nothing left in me to give and because the door was about to open. It opened at 2:19. A woman came in fast without knocking, mid-40s, wool coat, phone in one hand, a folder in the other. Corinne Yates, the Pilcher's agent. 22 years in this market, the kind of person who has a reputation and protects it. She said, "Bryn." Bryn, still 3 steps up, said, "Corinne, hi, can you give me 2 minutes?" And Corinne Yates said, at a volume she absolutely did not intend, because she'd spent the last 18 hours discovering what she'd been handed. The title came back. "You are not on it. Nobody named Algren is on this house, and you signed a seller's affidavit on Wednesday." I have never heard a room go that quiet. Not at a funeral, not anywhere. 35 people, a vanilla plug-in, meatballs going cold. And then, and this is the part I'll be seeing when I'm 80, every head in that room slowly turned, one at a time, toward the guy by the coat closet holding a folder. Because a bunch of them already knew. Deke's father knew. Dano had suspected. Aunt Verna had known since 2019 and had been told to mind her business. Bryn came down the 3 steps and said, "Emmett, tell her." I said, "Tell her what?" She said, "Tell her about our agreement." And I said, "Which one? The one you signed or the one you refused to sign?" That's it. That's the loudest I got all day. Then I walked over to the island, my cabinets, quarter-sawn white oak, 4 coats of hard wax oil, and I set the folder down and opened it and stepped back. The deed on top. Then the quitclaim. Then 8 years of tax receipts, stapled by year. Then the insurance declaration with my LLC as named insured. Then the 1-page Sharpie agreement. Then the 9-page lease option, unsigned, with the screenshot printed and clipped to the front. I'm not signing something that turns me into a tenant in my own house. Then the payment history, with the column of nothing. I said, to nobody in particular, "It's all there. Take your time." Corinne Yates read the top 3 documents standing up, said one quiet word I won't repeat, and left to call her clients. Bryn was talking. I honestly could not tell you what she said. I remember, "You never told anybody." And I remember, "You let me," which is a remarkable sentence when you examine it. And then my mother came across the room. She had the paper plate in her hand still. She stopped in front of me and she said, "Emmett, is that true? You own this house?" I said, "Since 2017, Mom." And she said, "Well, why didn't you ever say anything?" And that question, in that room, from that woman, is when the last thing came out of me. I reached into the folder and took out the last sheet. The green one. Pencil. My grandfather's format. Sable Court. September 2016 through the present. 109 months. I held it out to her. I said, "Because you told me nobody was keeping score." 5th time. And this time it came out of my mouth, not hers. She took the paper. She read it. I watched her read it twice because her eyes went back to the top. $118,940. And Aunt Verna, from over by the window, in a voice like a chair scraping, said, "Loretta, say it out loud." My mother did not say it out loud. She sat down on the arm of the couch and put the plate on the floor and put her hand over her eyes. I picked up my folder. I said, "Thanks for having me." And I drove to the shop and sanded a stair rail for 2 hours because I did not know what else to do with my hands. Here's what happened after, in order. the way I'd write it up for a file. February 9th, 2026. The Pilchers terminated. Their earnest money, $5,000, was released back to them, but they'd already paid for an inspection, an appraisal, and a rate lock. Out of pocket, about $2,200. February 11th. Corinne Yates filed a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission. Not me. I never filed anything against my sister. I want that on the record because people assume I did. February 12th. Hollis Pemberton, her broker, suspended her and pulled her listings. There were 4. He also, I found out later, self-reported the brokerage's supervision failure, which is why he kept his own license. February 20th. Deke came to the shop, alone, on a Friday afternoon. He sat in my office with his coat on and said, "I told her to sign that lease in 2021. I said, "I know. I remember you saying it." He said, "I stopped asking about it. That's mine. I let it be her department because it was easier." And then he said, "I'm taking option 3. They vacated on March 21st, 2026. Deke's parents and my crew helped move them. Yes, my crew. I sent 3 guys in a box truck. And no, I did not bill him. I paid the $6,000 in relocation, and on March 23rd, Vera sent a 1-page release waiving the entire $47,300 in arrears, permanently, unconditionally. People ask me why. Here's why. I didn't want the money. I never wanted the money. I wanted the door. April 3rd, 2026. My mother called me and asked if I'd meet her at the Wicker Spoon on 3rd. Vinyl booth, patched with tape. Coffee in the brown mugs. She'd missed her first mortgage payment. My prepay had run out March 1st, exactly like the letter said. She started with, "I want you to know, nobody was keeping." And I said, "Mom." And she stopped. Then she cried in a diner booth at 9:40 in the morning, which I had never seen her do. And she said the only genuinely honest thing she has ever said to me: "I let them think you weren't doing well because it made it easier to be proud of her." I didn't say anything for a while. Then I said, "Okay." She said, "That's it? Okay?" I said, "You said it out loud. That's the whole thing I wanted. That's all it ever was." April through August 2026. I helped her sell the house. My crew painted it, fixed the soffits, and pulled the carpet in the back bedroom. The utility room, my old room. The water heater's gone. It's a laundry room with a folding counter now. 118 Sable Court sold on August 14th, 2026, for $268,000. After the $91,000 payoff in costs, she netted $158,200. She bought Unit 214 at Bellwether Commons for $139,000, cash. 2-bedroom, ground floor, no stairs, 4 blocks from the church. For the first time since 1989, my mother owns her home outright and owes nobody anything, including me. She calls me on Sundays now, not to ask for anything. That took about 6 months to get used to, and I still brace a little when the phone rings. June 2026, the Real Estate Commission hearing. Bryn didn't contest the facts, because there weren't any facts to contest. 24-month suspension, $7,500 fine, and required ethics coursework as a condition of reinstatement. She surrendered the license in August instead. She works at a property management office in Aldergrove now, in the office, answering the maintenance line. I know how that sounds. I'm not going to pretend it isn't ironic. I'm also not going to enjoy it out loud, because she's my sister, and her kids are my niece and nephew, and there's nothing funny about a 42-year-old woman starting over. June 19th, 2026. I sold 7 Quarry Bend to Rennie and Tasha Pilcher for $352,000. Same price, same house, 5 weeks of rehab, first $37,400, mostly paint, flooring, and the crawl space again. I left the height marks on the laundry room door frame and taped over them before the painters came. Tasha Pilcher asked me about them at the walkthrough, and I said they belonged to the house. And she said she'd leave them. And I believe her. Anne Bryn. Nothing for 4 months. Then a text in July. I don't know how to talk to you. I wrote back. Then don't talk. Come to dinner. She came in September. It was awful for about half an hour and then it was survivable. She hasn't apologized in a sentence with the word sorry in it. She did say, in November, standing in my kitchen, you should have made me sign it in 2021. Which isn't an apology, but it's a fact. And it's my fact as much as hers, and I'll take a shared fact over a fake apology every day of the week. She and Deke are still together. He handles the money now. I bought a house on September 9th, 2026, 12 Pell Street, built 1911, American four-square, 2.5 stories, hipped roof, big square porch with brick piers, knob and tube wiring, a dead boiler, a collapsed rear addition, 40 years of a bad tenant history, and a landlord who'd stopped caring in 1998. $214,000. My crew told me I was out of my mind, and then every one of them showed up on Saturdays anyway. I did the millwork myself, nights mostly. I milled new casings off a salvaged sample from the front parlor. I rebuilt 11 double-hung windows on my own bench, sash by sash, glazing points and putty, the whole thing, which is objectively insane, in 2026 and which I would do again. I moved in on February 12th, 2027. 2 days before that, I walked down to Hollenbeck Hardware on Bellwether, which is 4 doors down from what used to be 218, and I asked for Dodie Whitcomb. Dodie is 74. She worked for my grandfather from 1979 until he sold the shop, and when he sold it, Hollenbeck bought his key machine, and Dodie went with it. She still cuts keys on it. Same machine, same wheel housing, rebuilt twice. I gave her my new front door key and asked for 2 copies. She put the blank in and hit the wheel, and the whole street smelled like hot brass for 4 seconds, and I was 9 years old with an orange soda. She handed them to me and wouldn't take my money. Here's where they went. The original is on my ring, next to my grandfather's brass key on the dark leather fob. The one that opens nothing. It's been on there 14 years and I have no plans to take it off. Copy 1 went to my mother. I gave it to her at her kitchen table at Bellwether Commons, and she held it for a second too long and then put it in the little dish by her door. Copy 2 went to Sawyer. He's 18 now. He works for me on school breaks, and he is genuinely good at millwork, which nobody expected. I gave it to him in the shop and I said, "This is for if you ever need somewhere to go." He said, "Okay," which is exactly what I'd have said. It runs in the family, apparently, the not saying. I did not give one to Bryn. She's welcome in my house any Sunday she wants, and she's been 3 times now, and she knocks. I think we both prefer it that way for a while. So that's it. For 38 years, I let people measure me by what they could see in the driveway. And for 38 years, I told myself that being quiet about what I did was the same as being humble. It isn't. Being quiet about it is just a slow way of teaching people that it costs you nothing. My grandfather had it right, and it took me 25 years and $119,000 to understand what he actually meant. He wasn't telling me to be silent. He was telling me where the truth lives. Keys are noise. Deeds are quiet. Let them rattle whatever they want at you. Just make sure that when somebody finally asks who owns the door, the answer is written down and recorded and dated, and that you never once had to shout it. That's my story. Thank you for sitting through all of it. I know it was long, and I know that if you're still here, it's probably because some part of it sounded like your own kitchen table. If it did, share this with the one person in your family who fixes everything and gets thanked for nothing. Leave a comment and tell me what your version of the brass key is, the thing you carry that doesn't open anything anymore. And tell me where you're listening from. I read every one of them, usually at 6 in the morning with coffee, before the crews roll out. Subscribe if you want the next one, because I've got a good one lined up. Keep your receipts. Say the sentence with the date in it. I'll see you in the next.